Hallelujah. Let Lord Jesus Christ shine forth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us. Welcome to another live stream with DCCI Ministries. Good to see some of you in the chat. Can I get quick confirmation regarding the sound? That will be very helpful. Let me say hi to author of the Quran and also author of Muhammad now. How are you doing, Robert?
Very well, thank you, Hatun. How are you?
By God's grace, I am good, thank you. So you used to be just the author of the Quran. Now you are also the author of Muhammad. How did that happen? You
Well, the
mentioned,
book Muhammad: A Critical Biography is just out. This is the new surah, the new Sirat Rasulullah, and it is already being suppressed. The Amazon, oh, there it is. Look at that.
yeah, I got.
The Amazon has already taken down at least two that I know of positive reviews and left up a negative one. And so they're up to their same tricks as they were when the Quran came out, the critical Quran, and it was number one in the Quran category, and then they took it out of the Quran category. So there are people out there very much wanting to suppress the truth, but the truth will ultimately be victorious anyway.
I'm sorry to hear that. Actually, no, that's in a sense it's good because it shows that people are bothered by what the tradition says.
Yes, they don't want the word out about what Muhammad said and did. And of course, you know why, because what he said and did, it's not for the faint hearted and
Yeah.
not
So
what you might expect from a prophet.
Uh, I read quite a bit of it right now. I quite enjoy it. If those of you who are watching, if you haven't got it yet, please get it. It's available. And it's pretty good,
Thank you.
actually. Pretty good. You are a very good writer.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Not really, actually, but yeah. Hopefully, we will have some discussions on it as weeks are coming. So,
Yes.
Um, last week, I think this is our fourth week on Surah 2. We've been talking about what Surah 2 is trying to communicate with us since this is the last revelation. This book is the last revelation of Allah. We are expecting that Allah will express His will in a perfect form. But last week, you kind of brought up certain things to our attention that Allah is not that very good communicator. So we left in Surah 2, verse 101. We finished that. We are in Surah 2, verse 102. Before I kind of start reading for you to comment, is there anything you kind of want to bring to our attention from last week?
I don't think so. I think we can just start anew now.
Okay. Surah 2, verse 102. And when they follow what the Satan used to recite in the kingdom of Solomon, Solomon did not disbelieve, but the Satans disbelieved, teaching mankind sorcery and what was revealed to the two angels in Babel, Harut and Marut. Not did they teach it anyone without first saying, We are only the temptation, so do not disbelieve. So they learned from them what caused division between man and wife, but they injure no one thereby, except by Allah's permission. And they learned what harms them and does not harm them. And surely they do not know that he who buys it will have no share in the hereafter. And surely evil is the price for which they sell their souls, if only they knew.
All right. So, what on earth is going on here? We don't know. Because here again, we have a story that is referred to but not explained. And this happens many, many times in the Quran. Was that over here or over there? Uh, anyway, if it doesn't keep up, I guess it doesn't matter. Harut and Marut, who are they? In the first place, the Islamic scholar Richard Bell says no explanation of these names have been found. He suggests that what the Satans used to recite in the kingdom of Solomon could be a reference to rabbinic law, and that the mention of Babil may further suggest the Babylonian Talmud, but the whole verse is obscure. That's one Islamic scholar that I quote in the footnotes to the Critical Quran. But there's another, William St. Clair Tisdall, who says Harut and Marut were two idols worshipped far back in Armenia. For in writers of that country they are so spoken of, as in the following passage from one of them. Certainly Horot and Morot, tutelary deities of Mount Ararat, and Aminabeg, and perhaps others now not known, were assistants to the female goddess Aspandaramet. These aided her and were excellent on the earth. And so apparently it is, these are idols, but the Quran refers to them as two angels in Babel, Harut and Marut. So the whole thing is very obscure and indicates that the Quran is indeed an adaptation of the of earlier texts, and yet often without understanding the earlier texts. And I see somebody saying in the chat, Babylonian Talmud before it existed, and this is a very good point, because Babylonian Talmud actually does predate the traditional date for the Quran. However, it seems likely that the Quran itself comes later than most people think, especially because in the Hadith, as I discuss in Muhammad, a critical biography, there is some arguing about the ordering of the surahs and other aspects of the Quran, which are supposed to have been settled a century and a half before. And so, what on earth is that all about? If these things were settled, why are they still being controverted in the 9th century? And so, we cannot take the traditional chronology for granted.
Just a quick question. So, in your first statement, you kind of read a couple of scholars, and then you said something in the lines of, "This whole verse is just like rubbish." Was that your? I'm just rephrasing. Was
Yes.
that your statement, or is that what Muslim scholars said?
No, that's not what the Muslim scholars say. They just have various explanations for it. But what I'm saying is that it's not at all clear from the text of the Quran what's being said. So the Islamic scholars have various explanations that may make superficial sense of it, but there's no necessary reason why those explanations are correct. They're just trying to make sense of a passage that actually has no clear meaning at all.
Okay. Verse 103. And if they had believed and kept away from evil, a reward from Allah would have been better if they had not known, if they had known. O you who believe, do not say, listen to us, but say, look upon us and listen. For unbelievers there is a painful doom. Neither the unbelievers among the people of the book, nor the adulteries love the idea that there should be sent down to you any good thing from your Lord. But Allah chooses for his mercy from whom he wills, and he is of indefinite bounty.
Okay, so we have neither the unbelievers nor the idolaters love the idea that there should be sent to you any good thing from your Lord, and yet you have this wonderful Quran. So there was there's a point here I wanted to make sure to get. Sorry, I lost it now.
Is that verse 105?
Yeah, it was right there. Well, that's it. I'm sorry. I had a point in mind. See, I'm getting old, Hatun. I'm sorry. I
That's
just flew right out of my head. It'll probably come back to me, but go ahead.
Allah wanted you to forget, so it's absolutely fine. Would you be able to comment on the part where it says, neither the unbelievers among the people of the book nor the adulteries love the idea that there should be sent down to you any good things from your Lord. But
Yeah, the
Allah,
idolaters.
yeah, Allah chooses for his mercy whom he wills, and Allah is of indefinite bounty.
Now, see, it's funny because it says in the verse 103 that if they had believed, it would have been better if they had known. So apparently they just didn't know better and they didn't believe. But then in 105, it says, neither the unbelievers nor the idolaters love the idea that there should be sent down to you any good thing from your Lord, but Allah chooses for his mercy whom he will. So there's others that he chooses to torture forever in hell for no reason at all.
Because he's very merciful and he's very kind. Is that not good enough reason?
Yeah, there you go. So he's so merciful and kind that some people he created just to torture forever.
Yeah, so that Muslims can live happily after, non-Muslims can torture for long, long time.
Yes.
And then we've got this very famous verse. We do not abrogate or cause to be forgotten anything of our revelation unless we bring something better or like it. Do you not know that Allah is able to do all things?
Mm-hmm. That's, of course, the basis for the idea of abrogation. And abrogation is the idea that what comes later in the Quran, chronologically according to Islamic tradition, which is, of course, highly questionable, but nonetheless, according to Islamic tradition, if it comes later and it contradicts what comes earlier, then it supersedes what comes earlier. And the biggest problem of this is that the violent passages come later chronologically, and thus they supersede what comes earlier.
So I think it was in our first session you expressed that Quran is the eternal word of Allah revealed directly from Allah. But in this verse it expresses that Allah will bring something better or something like it. So what is your view that why didn't Allah reveal the better version in the first revelation? Or if it is going to be something like it, why needs to be like another verse?
All right. This is why chapter 5, verse 101 was revealed, because of questions like that. Chapter 5, I know I'm skipping way far ahead, and
That's
we'll get to it in a few years, but I'll just read it now very quickly. That's not it. Chapter 5, verse 101. One moment, please. We're almost there. Says, "O you who believe, do not ask about things which, if they were made known to you, would trouble you. But if you ask about them while the Quran is being revealed, they will be made known to you. Allah forgives this, for Allah is forgiving, merciful. A people before you asked and then became unbelievers." This is just the kind of question that this is for. See, the people, either in the traditional view, Muhammad originated the Quran and he contradicted himself because he's a false prophet and he was not given messages from God. So he contradicted himself in the course of things and then had to explain the contradictions. And that's why you get chapter 2, verse 106. In the revisionist view, the view that I follow in Muhammad, a critical biography, Muhammad is a fictional construct, but the people who are creating Islam and Muhammad, they have to cover for all the contradictions between the various stories and the various groups that formulate stories about Muhammad. And so they make this up, that there can be abrogation. But really, you're right. Your question is very pointed. In Islam, it makes no sense that if Allah gives you a good verse already, why would he cause it to be forgotten and replace it? And how could there be one that's better if the whole thing is perfect? There's no explanation for this.
Like, sake of the argument, okay, something is better going to come that Allah wants people to look forward for. But if it is going to be something like it, then why there needs to be like new version of it? And you said like violent verses are the kind of latest revelation which abrogates the earlier versions. Am I right to remember that also we do have verses within the Hadith tradition that simply abrogates certain teachings within the Quran?
Oh, certainly, yes. Well, for one thing, there is the stoning, and you have stoning of adulterers practiced in several Sharia states today. notably in Afghanistan, but also elsewhere. And so stoning is never in the Quran. And it says, isn't I believe it's chapter 24, verse 2, offhand, but I may be wrong about that, that says that they should be lashed. So why the stoning? Well, there's a hadith in which the Caliph Umar is depicted as saying that the stoning was originally in the Quran and Muhammad practiced it, but it's no longer in the Quran, which he gives no explanation for. And he doesn't want people in future generations to get the idea that they should not stone adulterers. They should, but he doesn't explain why it's not in the Quran anymore. And of course, one obvious explanation for that is that it's not in the Quran anymore because the Quran was indeed undergoing revisions on the basis of being vied for by several factions, that there were groups among the Muslims who wanted their point of view in the Quran. So the final product we have is a book that was written by committee and reflects many different perspectives and different groups. And so the people who wanted stoning in it, they lost. But then they went away and wrote the hadith saying, Muhammad really wanted stoning and it really ought to be in the Quran, but it's not anymore. And this shows that there were different versions, and the whole thing underwent a process of editing to create what we have today.
So not only later verses abrogates the earliest verses when there's a disagreement, but also hadith abrogates the Quran.
Well, officially they don't. Officially, according to Islamic tradition, hadith can never abrogate Quran unless it's hadith Qudsi. Hadith Qudsi being when Muhammad quotes Allah, and the quote that he gives is not in the Quran, and then that's considered to be on par with the Quran. But otherwise, that's only a small number of hadiths. But otherwise, it's just all the teachings of Muhammad, and so, or the example of Muhammad. And so the Quran always theoretically supersedes it, but in practice that is contradicted.
Okay.
If Quran always superseded hadith, then no Sharia states would practice stoning, and yet they do.
So that the 101 hadith Qudsi you mentioned. So if Muhammad is giving us quotation from Allah, if Muhammad is telling us this is what Allah says, how come they didn't end up in the Quran as the part of revelation?
There's any number of reasons. The traditional Islamic theology has no explanation for that. Because if Muhammad is giving words from Allah, that's the Quran. That's what we're told the Quran is, right? That Gabriel comes to see Muhammad and gives him Quran. And then we have Muhammad quoting Allah. That ought to be in the Quran, but it isn't. The explanation in real life is that all the stories about all the parts of the Quran were fabricated for various reasons. And that these stories of Muhammad quoting Allah were also fabricated for various reasons, but they didn't make it into the Quran because the people who were putting the Quran together were against what was being said. They were of a different party among the Muslims, or else it was in one version of the Quran that lost out to another version, and so on. And so nowadays we have this strange phenomenon of the Hadith Qudsi, for which there's really no explanation, at least no explanation within the standard Islamic tradition, because it is he's supposed to have gotten the Quran in pieces all the way up to his death. So why would these be left out? No reason.
Allah knows best.
Yes.
So Phyllis says any verse that might be abrogated has to be replaced with that is better than it or similar to it.
Yes.
That you give the example of Surah 24 verse 2 on the lashing versus stoning the adulteries. So am I right to in that case understand that stoning is better than lashing? How is that better?
Well, you see, you got more problems here because there is no stoning passage in the Quran.
Yeah, in the
So
hadith.
maybe it's not better. because the Quran says we will give you a better one, a better. It seems to be said. Excuse me. It seems to be saying you'll get a better Quran verse, but you don't get a better Quran verse for stoning. There is no Quran verse for stoning, so it's arguably not better.
What about the violence versus like fight the unbeliever stuff? Is that like better than your religions to you, my religions to me?
That would be the assumption based on this passage. Yes, it's better to say kill them wherever you find them than you have your religion and we have ours.
Okay. Verse 107. Do you not know that Allah is to whom belong to the dominion of the heavens and the earth, and you do not have any guardian or helper beside Allah? Or would you question your messenger, as Moses was questioned earlier? He who chooses disbelief instead of faith, indeed he has gone astray from the right path.
Mm-hmm.
In here it says like someone who chooses to disbelieve, but verse earlier we read that actually Allah is the one who planning people to disbelieve.
That's right. It's a flat contradiction. There's no
Okay.
reconciling those two. You
Okay.
either choose disbelief or Allah makes you disbelieve, but you can't, there's no way you can have both.
Okay.
And so this was actually a controversy, as we spoke of a couple weeks ago, I think it was, that took place in the early Islamic community when the Qadariya said there's free will. And then the opposing party said, no, there's no free will. Allah chooses who believes and who doesn't. And that became the basic understanding within Islam. And the Qadariya were considered heretical. So the ones who think that he who chooses disbelief instead of faith, those who think now that that's even possible, that is a belief that has been declared heretical in Islam by the highest authorities.
Okay. Many of the people of the book long to make you unbelievers after you believe, though envy on their own account after the truth has become clear to them. Forgive them and be indulgent until Allah gives command. Indeed, Allah is able to do all things.
I'm very happy to report that I just remembered what I was going to say with verse 105.
Yes.
That and it connects to this too, because it says many of the people of the book long to make you unbelievers. And in 105 it says the unbelievers among the people of the book. Now this is very important distinction, because the Quran, in other words, envisions the people of the book in two groups. The people of the book, once again, are primarily Jews and Christians. Also Zoroastrians, Sabaeans, who we discussed before, they're all people of the book. And there now we learn from verse 105 and also 110 that there are two kinds of people of the book. There are believers among the people of the book and unbelievers among the people of the book. The believers among the people of the book are the Jews and Christians and the others who become Muslims. And the unbelievers among the people of the book are the actual Jews and Christians and Zoroastrians and so on. They remain unbelievers because they don't accept Islam. And so in this passage, in 105, it says that they hate the idea that the Muslims got a revelation. They do not love the idea that there should be sent down to you any good thing from your Lord. And then in 109, I said 110 before, excuse me, 109 says that they want to make you unbelievers after you believe. So the unbelievers among the people of the book, that's us. That is Christians and also Jews and Zoroastrians who do not believe in Muhammad and Islam. And it's saying that we are trying to turn the Muslims from their faith out of envy.
So what is it that we are envying? We are envying that they are like worshiping false.
What is it that we're envying? It's a very good question. It's an excellent question.
Are we envying that like their Islamic paradise? Are we envying that they worship like false prophet? Are we envying that? Like, what is it like?
I wish I knew. I don't see anything to envy in Islam. It seems to me to be harsh and inhumane, and in teaching evil as good in so many ways, and in joining people, enforcing a life of tremendous unnecessary suffering upon people in so many ways. And so I don't envy Muslims or Islam. But that's what the Quran says, that they, through envy on their own account, after the truth has become clear to them. This is another core belief in Islam. The truth has become clear to them. So you see, you and I, according to a pious Muslim, know Islam is true. And you see this in the Hadith as well, that there are non-Muslims who come to see Muhammad and they know Islam is true. There's a very famous story about the Christians from Najran coming to see Muhammad, and I tell it in the book, in Muhammad, A Critical Biography. They, on the way, the leader of the Christians tells his people, we know this man is the prophet we've been waiting for, but the Byzantines pay us good money, and they would cut us off if we accepted him as a prophet. And so we're going to argue with him in every way we possibly can. And that's the view that a lot of Muslims have to this day about the Jews and Christians and others, that they know what is true, but refuse to accept it out of envy or out of a desire for profit, because they're bad for money, and somehow they think you can make a lot of money by opposing Islam.
Well, yeah, Islam is so truth. I just like can't control myself to. I'm just like intentionally. What is the term? I'm intentionally fighting against it. You know, it's like so. I've got lots of reasons that I should become a Muslim, but just like yeah, big fight, big fight. Flash says something else. So, flash says something else. Spirit says something else. Verse
well, luckily, it says forgive them and be indulgent until Allah gives command. Unfortunately, he gave command, you see, because that's the later verses that say fight them and kill them and so on.
Establish prayer and give alms, and whatever good things you send ahead for your souls, you will find it with Allah. Indeed, Allah is the seer of what you do. And they say, no one enters paradise unless he is a Jew or a Christian. There are their own desires. Those are their own desires. Say, bring your proof if you are truthful. No, but whoever surrenders himself to Allah while doing good, his reward is with his Lord, and no fear will come upon them, neither will they grieve. And the Jew says the Christians follow nothing, and Christians say the Jews follow nothing. Yet both are the readers of the book. Those who do not know speak this way. Allah will judge between them on the day of resurrection concerning those things they disagree about.
Notice that it says they're readers of the book, not the books. The Torah and the Gospel are supposed to be essentially the same book as the Quran, because it's all just the single revelation from Allah. And so the fact that the Torah and the Gospel contradict the Quran is, as we discussed before, evidence that they've been corrupted, as far as Islam, as far as Muslims believe.
So Christians and Jews will enter the paradise?
Only the believers among the people of the book, not
Only,
the unbelievers among the people of the book.
Only ex-Jews and ex-Christians.
Precisely, the ones who become Muslim, because the other ones are still being obstinate and trying to make you unbelievers and so on. All the rest of it that's in 109 and following.
And who does greater wrong than he who forbids the approach to the sanctuaries of Allah to prevent his name should be mentioned in them, and works for their destruction. As for such people, it was never meant that they should enter them except in fear. For them there is disgrace in the world, and for them in the hereafter is an awful doom.
Okay,
To
so apparently there are people who are blocking the way and preventing the Muslims from entering mosques, because you see that he who does greater wrong than he who forbids the approach to the sanctuaries of Allah. There is, of course, in Islamic tradition, as I discuss also in the Muhammad book, that Muhammad was forbidden while the Muslims were in Medina and fighting the pagan Quraysh from Mecca. The Muslims were forbidden from making the pilgrimage to Mecca. And so that's the standard explanation of this passage in Islam, that it's referring to he who forbids the approach to the sanctuaries of Allah are the Quraysh who forbid Muhammad from entering Mecca to make the pilgrimage to Mecca. And so note that it says also, for them there is disgrace in this world, and for them in the hereafter is an awful doom. This is something we're going to see a lot throughout the Quran, that if you disobey Allah, you will have trouble in this world and the next. And if you obey Allah, you will have good things in this world and the next. And so a Muslim will expect that if he obeys Allah, he will become prosperous, wealthy, successful in this world. And that those who disobey Allah will be poor and humiliated and disgraced. And then it doesn't work out that way. And yet most Muslims don't put it together and say, maybe what Allah is saying isn't true. That never seems to occur to most of them. And they usually just blame the Jews or something else, someone else at this point. But the Quran promises that if you obey Allah, you will do well in this world. And if you disobey Allah, you will suffer in this world. And yet, that's not the way it works. There are many, many non-Muslim countries in the world that are much wealthier than the Muslim countries. Allah seems to have given them more success, but he doesn't explain why in the Quran.
So Hamas and Hezbollah is not doing well. Clearly, they disobeyed Allah.
Yeah.
I get to see lots of ads where Muslims are raising money for support of Hamas or support of Palestine, Gaza. So how come they still can't put together, oh, this is what Allah wants them to go through? Because they've been disgraced to Allah. Allah is just simply punishing what they've done.
Well, that would follow from what he says here, that if you disobey Allah, then you should get disgrace in this world, and in the hereafter an awful doom. So if you get disgrace in this world, you should get the idea that Allah maybe not be so happy with you as you think. But that would contradict other aspects of Islam. That you look at what Islam teaches and look at what Hamas and Hezbollah do, it's the same. So they cannot possibly imagine that they would be doing anything wrong. They're doing exactly right according to what Allah teaches. So they should be prospering.
Yet they're not.
And so the only remedy they have for that is that they have to do more of it.
Yeah. To Allah belong to the east and the west, and wherever you turn, there is Allah's face. Indeed, Allah is all-embracing, all-knowing. And they say, Allah has taken to himself a son. May he be glorified. No, but whatever is in the heavens and the earth is his. All submit to him.
Now, why would that be a contradiction to the idea that God has taken a son?
Surah 111, 112, Allah doesn't have a son.
Yes, but
And
it says here, you see, that Allah doesn't have a son because whatever is in the heavens and the earth is his, and all submit to him.
Maybe
why does that tell us that he doesn't have a son? You see,
Allah doesn't like sharing or inheriting things.
Yes.
Allah doesn't know how to be father. Allah doesn't know how to teach his son. Lots of reasons Allah is not functioning well there.
Exactly. That the idea is that if he has a son, then the son will grow up and replace him, as a son will grow up and live as an adult while the father dies. So it's the same thing. Allah can't do that because he's the perfect eternal being, so he cannot have a son. And of course, that's not the Christian idea at all. The Quran is just envisioning all this in human terms and
Yeah.
thinking that to have a son would show that Allah is somehow insufficient or finite. And so it's rejected on this. The Christian idea is rejected on those grounds.
Also, you've got Quranic verse talks about Allah cannot have a son because he doesn't have a companion, like he's not handsome enough to get a girlfriend or wife, therefore he cannot have a baby.
That's it.
Um, you're okay?
I'm just wondering who he's going to marry, though, because
But
there's
he's not.
nobody around.
No, first of
No,
all,
he's not going to.
yeah, yeah, biblical understanding of son is father is loving the son before the foundation of the world. There is no time and place that like son is being created or son is being made. Yet I don't know, like word of Allah supposed to be the last revelation gets very core doctrine of Christianity wrong. Allah just lacks with the basics.
Yes, you would think that if he knew everything, that he wouldn't make basic mistakes like the Trinity is Allah and Jesus and Mary, which he says in chapter 5 of the Quran. That's a rookie mistake. Everybody who knows the most rudimentary things about Christianity would know that's not true. Probably what happened was the people who were putting the Quran together, they went into Orthodox churches. And in Orthodox churches, you see large icons on the iconostasis, the wall between the sanctuary and where the people are, with one on Jesus on one side and Mary on the other, of the doors that open to the altar. And so probably they assumed, oh, these are their three gods. But this was like I say, it's a basic mistake. It's not what any kind of Christianity teaches.
It confirms how man-made religion it is, because Allah wouldn't make such a mistake if he's the creator
Exactly.
of all. And it kind of usually finishes like, oh yeah, he's all, like a verse before that says he's all knowing, yet he doesn't even know what it is for God to have son in Christian doctrine.
Indeed.
Just a quick question on verse 116. So Allah has taken, not that one, verse 115. To Allah belong to the east and the west, and wherever you turn, there is Allah's face. I did spoke to Muslims who interpreted this verse as when they pray, they don't need to turn to Mecca because their prayer direction will be in everywhere. What is your interpretation of that?
I think that's absolutely true. That this is probably a verse that was included by a faction that opposed the Qibla being in Mecca or Jerusalem or anywhere else, or Petra or anywhere, and saying you can pray in any direction. And that it was put into the Quran, and then people who believed that there ought to be a Qibla, the direction for prayer, pointing to Mecca, they have other verses that establish that we'll come to actually fairly soon, and they didn't notice this one or forgot about it, or it was added at another time and place, and so it's both in there, but it's just a contradiction. Otherwise, you could use this verse to argue that there's no reason to face Mecca when you pray because Allah is everywhere. So what's the problem?
Yeah, and someone is expressing that's pagan.
Yeah. And so it does indicate that this is a book written by a committee, that it's not that Muhammad was so scatterbrained that in verse 115 he says you can pray in any direction, and then it's in the 200s where you have to pray toward Mecca. It's that one group of Muslims put this in here, and another group put in the Meccan the passages saying you have to pray to Mecca later on. And there wasn't a good enough editor to catch it and smooth it all out.
Hmm. Maybe the creator of heaven and the earth, when he declares a thing, he just says it to be, and it is.
So this is the supposedly more of the refutation that Allah has a son, because actually, if you want to say that God said something be and it is, well, you have God creating the universe that way. Let there be light, and there was light. But also the creation of, or rather, the incarnation of Jesus also takes place in that way, because it is by the Holy Spirit that Mary becomes the mother of Jesus. And the Quran is once again envisioning this as a physical thing, that it is by physical, in the physical way that human beings are conceived, that Jesus is conceived. And so the Quran is assuming that wrongly, that that's what Christianity teaches, and then dismissing it, and actually saying what Christianity does teach, that Jesus is conceived in the womb of his mother just by the word of Allah, or the word of God. So it's it's kind of an interesting contradiction here, that the Quran is claiming to refute Christianity and actually affirming it.
Yeah. And those who have no knowledge say, why doesn't Allah speak to us or some sign come to us, even in this way as they now speak? Those before them spoke. Their hearts are all alike. We have made clear the signs for people who are sure. Indeed, we have sent you with the truth as a bringer of good news and a warner, and you will not be asked about the companion of the blazing fire. And the Jews will not be pleased with you, neither will the Christians, until you follow their religion. Say, indeed, the guidance of Allah is guidance. And if you follow their desire after the knowledge that has come to you, then you would have from Allah no protecting guardian or helper.
The Jews will not be pleased with you, neither will the Christians, until you follow their religion. This creates a tremendous suspicion among Muslims, that you have Muslims believing that if Jews and Christians are friendly to them, it's just because they want to make them non-Muslim. A few years back, I'm writing a new book, and I was just writing about this the other day, that during the Bush administration, there was a Secretary of State, Colin Powell, and a tsunami in Indonesia, and he went over to Aceh, where the Indonesians were especially hurt. Hundreds of thousands were killed, and he was bringing all kinds of aid. And he did an interview while he was there, and the interviewer asked him, isn't this ironic, while the US is waging war in Iraq and Afghanistan, that you would be coming and bringing a Muslim country all this food and other aid to rebuild? And he said, I hope that they'll see this and see that the Americans are not really so bad, and that we will be able to build bridges with them on this basis. And I thought, this is incredibly naive, and this is why I'm writing about it now, that he would have thought that he could win their hearts and minds and make them love America by giving them money and food, when really they're only going to see him doing that and say, oh, he's trying to turn us away from Islam, because they'll never be happy with us until we become Jews and Christians. I don't know what that's referring to. What is that about?
This is referring to Allah having a son, like for
Oh,
Allah
of
having a
course.
son. So when is the book coming out?
The one I'm writing now, I have to finish it first. It'll be out next year. I have one that I finished about anti-Semitism. It'll be out in March. And then the one I'm working on now will probably be out about a year from now. They wait a long time with them. But Muhammad is out now, and you can get it.
Yeah.
And you should go write a positive review if you get it and you like it, because although Amazon's been taking them down, but maybe if they have so many to deal with, they won't take them down. We'll see.
Oh, Amazon. Amazon is already dimmy.
Yes.
Those to whom we have given the book, who read it with the right reading, those who believe in it, and whoever disbelieve in it, those are the ones who are the losers. O children of Israel, remember my favor with which I favored you and how I preferred you over the worlds. And guard against a day when no soul will help another in anything, and compensation will not be accepted from it, and intercession will be of no use to it, and they will not be helped.
Now note that suddenly we hear the children of Israel are favored above all others. We've never heard that before in the Quran, and there is uh, no explanation given for it. But there are many passages, of course, that have to do with the Jews, and many passages excoriating them for supposedly turning against Allah. And this is one of the reasons why there's so much hatred of Jews among Muslims even today, that they think that they had this particular choosing from Allah, which the Quran here affirms, and then they rebelled and rejected Allah, and thus Judaism is a false religion of the people who turned away from Allah. And if they had been fully on board with him, they would have accepted Muhammad.
And same Allah says, oh, there won't be any intercessor, there is no one who can help them.
Yeah, well, we will see. There are other passages of the Quran, chapter 10, verse 3, 2109, 2128, 3423, and 5326, that say that there are intercessors for various people before Allah. So that's just a flat contradiction. That's funny. Yes. They would do that, but they would remove material like the critical Quran, and not the Islamic editions of the Quran.
Well, that means it will be also be part of the responsibility of Christians to kind of inform others about the book, share it, encourage people to buy it, so Amazon kind of gets this crush. Oh, people want to buy this book. People want to buy this book. Therefore, they cannot just hide the reviews or anything.
Mm. Yes. Well, we'll see.
Verse 124. And when his Lord tried Abraham with the commandments, and he fulfilled them, he said, indeed, I have established you a leader for mankind. And he said, and what about my descendants? He said, my covenant does not include your wrongdoers.
So
And
you
when we
see,
have made,
Abraham is okay, but the Jews are not. Abraham is the leader for mankind, but his descendants, the Jews, those are the wrongdoers. So they don't get into the covenant.
so which covenant is this talking about? Genesis 15?
Probably, yeah. Although, of course, it's not mentioned as such in the Quran, but that is likely the covenant that he's talking about when that's likely rather what's being referred to in verse 122. O children of Israel, remember my favor with which I favored you and how I preferred you over the worlds. But they broke it, so there is no covenant with them.
So
Although Allah made them break it.
yeah, they had to be obedient to Allah. So your descendants are not going to be included because they are wrongdoers. Phil is asking the question, is this including Ishmael?
Ishmael was not a wrongdoer because Ishmael gets almost sacrificed. In the Islamic version of the story, Abraham is commanded to sacrifice Ishmael, and he almost does, but then he's stopped at the last minute by Gabriel, just like the story of Isaac in Genesis. And so then it's Ishmael who's considered the child of the promise and the father of the Arabs.
So in that case, when it says my descendants, that means like his grandchildren, I guess.
Yes, the Jews of the day of at the time that Muhammad is, or the time that the Quran is being written. Those Jews are the ones who are not included.
Okay. And when we made the house a refuge for mankind and sanctuary, take as a place for prayer the place where Abraham stood, and we impose the duty upon Abraham and Ishmael: purify my house for those who go around it, and those who meditate it, and those who bow down and prostrate themselves.
And that, of
And
course, is the Kaaba in Mecca that Abraham and Ishmael built according to Islamic tradition. So that's why they go around it, because Allah commends that right here.
so Allah doesn't have any problem for them to bow down to building.
That's right. And also, it's worth noting that according to the standard Islamic tradition, the Kaaba was filled with idols at this point when the Muslims are being commanded to go there and pray and go all around it and so on. Although you could argue that in 125, when it says purify my house, that refers to Muhammad going in and smashing all the idols.
But still, we've got in Islamic tradition, they were praying towards Mecca while they were idols, and Allah had no problem with that until they go and smash everything.
Yes.
So then question is, Allah doesn't want to have a son because Allah doesn't want his son to take over from him, but Allah is quite okay to share worship with other pagan gods, and Muhammad and many Muslims do that for years.
This is why you don't ask questions.
Okay. Okay.
Asking too many questions. People lose their faith that way.
My people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge.
That's right. That's the real thing, not the Quran.
Verse 126. And when Abraham prayed, my Lord, make this religion of security and give it to people its fruits. Those among them who believe in Allah and the last day, he answered, as for he who disbelieves, I will leave him in a contentment for a while. Then I will force him to the torment of fire, an evil journey's end. And when Abraham and Ishmael were raising the foundation of the house, O Lord, accept this from us. Indeed, you, only you, are the heir and knower. Our Lord, and make us Muslims and make our children a Muslim nation, and show us our ways of worship, and be merciful to us. Indeed, you only you are the forgiving and merciful. Our Lord, and raise up from among them a messenger who will recite your signs to them, and will instruct them in the book and the wisdom, and make them grow. Indeed, you, only you, are the mighty and wise. And who turns away from the religion of Abraham, except the one who is fooling himself. Indeed, we choose him in the world, and indeed, the hereafter he is among the righteous.
So here again, you have it. Indeed, we chose him in this world. So here again, you have the flat contradiction between that and verse 108. He who chooses disbelief instead of faith, indeed, he has gone astray from the right path. If he who chooses disbelief has gone astray, sorry, is that my? Yeah. If he who chooses disbelief has gone astray from the right path, well, then Allah says here, we have chosen. So this is what we see throughout the Quran, that free will is assumed, and yet Allah is affirmed as being the only one who's actually doing the choosing, making the choices in terms of who is saved and who isn't. And in Islamic tradition, it's all Allah and there's no free will.
So a couple of questions. In the Old Testament, when temple is being built, there were like sacrifices after sacrifices. It talks about like how many animals were like sacrificed. In here, Allah is simply okay with their prayer, correct? Comparing like those two. And Abraham is asking Allah to make them Muslims and make their children Muslim. In this, is Abraham is aware of who Muhammad is, because for someone to be Muslim, they must submit to Muhammad in his fullness. So where is that kind of, is this like where Abraham is like prophesying about Muhammad?
Well, see, this is the idea in Islam, that all of the prophets are Muslims. All of the prophets of the Jews in the Old Testament are Muslims, and Jesus is a prophet who is a Muslim, and they're all Muslims who they teach Islam. And so it was because the Jews and Christians twist their teachings that we have Judaism and Christianity. But originally, Abraham came and he says, "Make us Muslims." So he means he's a submitter. Muslim is a submitter, one who submits to Allah. And so he might not know anything about Muhammad, because Muhammad still comes later. So that right now we only have, there's no God but Allah. We don't have, and Muhammad is his prophet. But this is another contradiction in Islam, that Muhammad is supposed to have brought Islam, and yet Adam is the first Muslim prophet, and Abraham is a Muslim, as we see here, and they're all the prophets are Muslims before Muhammad.
So in that case, am I right to assume that until Muhammad's prophethood, there was no apostasy law?
Why would there not be?
Because if people can be identified as a Muslim without Muhammad, then apostasy law steps in when people reject Muhammad.
Well, that's a good point. Once again, this is why you don't ask questions. The Quran is completely contradictory about this. It has the apostasy law in chapter 4, verse 89, and much more clearly in the Hadiths.
Yeah.
But if you're right. You can't have had it before that, but it just doesn't work this way. The what this all is an attempt to reconcile the Quran saying that the Quran confirms the Torah and the gospel with the fact that it doesn't. And so they made up the idea that the Jews and Christians corrupted their scriptures.
Okay. I think we will pick up from there next week. So
they don't say Allah is a Muslim, but they do say he prays for Muhammad. That's in chapter 33, verse 36 that we'll get to 56. In 10 years or so.
Yeah, 56. So
is it 56? Oh, I'm sorry. 36 is you have to obey no matter what. Yeah, 56.
Yeah, so he's praying as well as angels are praying with him. But he's also taking zakat. He's like very busy guy. Yes. Allah is pretty busy.
It's a shame he doesn't have a son to help him.
Yeah, see, sharing, caring. If there were two of them, they could share the responsibilities. Okay, so those of you who are watching, please make time and then get the book, read it, and circulate it around. Since Amazon doesn't want it to be circulated, that means Muslims are behind Amazon. They don't want it to be circulated.
No doubt.
And also, beside for people to get that book, is there any way that people can support your work, support your ministry? Is there any way people can pray for you?
Thank you. Well, everybody can pray for me. I appreciate it. That doesn't take anything else but prayer. And the Patreon, there is a Patreon page, as well as Jihad Watch you can support at jihadwatch.org. I much appreciate it, and be sure to support Hatun as well. I'm sure you have that listed, and if not, I'm going to find it and post it. And thank you.
Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you very much everyone who joined us. We will pick up next week where we left at 131 verse of Surah 2, and then continue to get to know the word of Allah. It is good for our soul. It is very good for our soul. Thank you very much for joining me, Robert. By God's grace, I'll see you next week. And those of you who are watching, I will see you by God's grace tomorrow with Anthony Rogers to go through Mohammed Hijab's objections on Trinity. Until we meet again, Christ crucified, silent with his love. God bless you all.